history, so they have to make like a stage set, right, to show the history of it. So it's illustrating the history of a museum. So they're thinking, is a museum that important? But eventually, the museum was important because they used it as a rental space for events. So it became the program changes. So every year, I think there's probably more. Some people say it's 300 museums every year in China. This one, they say it's 100 museums every year. It's pretty impressive, huh? I mean, it's a cultural dynasty, it's a cultural archive. But a lot of times, you go there, it's quite empty. It's like you can hear the echo. It doesn't work. But I thought this is interesting. It's not a phenomenon here, but it's also it's an architecture phenomenon, right? The idea that you need to start to build cultural elements. You know, it's kind of like the end. You know, at the end, how do you symbolize China's iconographies, right? You use something as an archetypes. So I also got a project to commission. Actually, it's not a museum. It was just a piece of wall. And actually, they asked, and he was like, "We'll give you a project here." I said, and I was like, what is this? It's like it's a frame. They said, "We want you to decorate this wall." I said, "Sure, I could give you one-hand design. I don't even know how to decide what is good or not." So I said, "Why don't I come back and think about it?" Right? So I thought, is this a wall or is this a facade? The facade is something quite contemporary, like maybe 15th century, where you could, if you look at a city with a hard to articulate between relation inside and outside, or sometimes we call it maybe public and private, like the word that we use. But also, you start to understand this mediating relationship to larger objects of the place and also individual buildings. And the museum is called Inside Out, the commission. And the whole plot is designed by this architect called Tsang. And so basically, it was an old building connected to a new building. It's designed by the same architect 5 years apart. And they could not help figure out how to glue it together. So they built this frame, this wall, they thought some way to connect the two. And I said, okay, I'm going to build you a project. I will come back 1 week, and I'll give you a project. So I came back in 1 week, I built a wall, I cut it out. He said, what is this? I said, I'm going to build you a museum, the world's smallest museum, inside this wall. The wall is only 2 meters wide. That means that if it's 2 meters, that means it's really small. It's like less than 1 meter inside. I said, okay, great. We like the idea. So we started playing, and we thought, okay, but one of the questions that came up to me, I realized that if I build this museum, that means what do I collect there? And I actually decided I want to collect something, just one idea for each project. So I thought, I called it a project called the Grand Opening Project. So there's no grand opening for the wall, but there's a grand opening for make all the intervention projects occur throughout the whole entire year. So I told the owner, I said, here's the deal. If I could own this museum for 1 year, 2 years, because I'll curate the whole project. So that suddenly the architects not only just deliver the product anymore, they have to manage the projects. Because that's the only problem that maybe what the project failed is actually the museum is not the physical entity. It's the curation, the exhibition, and the things that are inside, the soft things. And you can see that when doing the grand openings, right, nobody's inside the building, right? So usually a very big party. You usually have party members sitting with this grand scale. And there's always this event. So there's a lot of these grand openings, but then we don't really know what happens to the building afterwards. Usually you go there and see the building, but usually it's quite empty. It's nothing there anymore. But I think this is quite a phenomenon, how to do that. So I decided I was going to introduce the idea of, I'm going to give you the first opening, which is a door. You get inside the wall. Once you get inside the wall, I'm going to create additional openings so you have a viewpoint to look out. Then also you have an opening to get the light. Right? So I thought, very funny because I'm very nervous about this project because I don't know if it's the real smallest. But I always check on the internet, like who's the smallest. But then I was like, that's not a museum, that's a thing. So 2 weeks ago, I had a talk in Beijing, and there was an architect, Yang Ho Chan. Tsang, he's also working in the smallest museum. So we were bragging each other. It's like, your museum is not as small as mine, but where is your project really start? So we talked about this. I mean, in Asia, the idea of like, who's the tallest tower, who's the biggest things. We're like intimately talking. It's like, but I could really make it smaller, but really, it's really the inside space. So it's not good. The conversation got interesting because the fact that it's the smallest, but it's the most expensive building in Beijing per square footage. Right? So we did different studies. We got a little crazy because the owner is he loves music, right? And he started to show me a lot of images of 19th century speakers. It looks like a horn. And he's showing them, and I said, this is funny because this is what we're looking at. The project was a little difficult because I didn't know who the client was. Because the client said, you have to present this project to Chui Kai. He's the architect for this project, so he has to approve it first. And the client said, so who are you then? He said, well, I'm just the guy backing up because I have to. So that was interesting. I thought the client, the architect was very intimate. So we were talking about it and we thought, something I realized, I could understand when the project is finished is when both the two clients agree with each other. At one point, they believed that the building is an instrument. It's no longer a building anymore, a space, but it's an instrument, like a musical instrument. So then I said, well, that's great. I will come back. I will start to give you more schemes. So this is actually the plan, right? And basically, it's very tiny. This is about 800, maybe 700. And then that one's about less than 1 meter. But this is the section. This is the building section. It's half staircase, half ramp. The ceiling's a roof, and actually this whole thing has no glass. So when it rains, it just rains. So basically you have to put a cap on top of it. And so you have a point where you actually listen to the buildings. You could actually listen to the building with the holes in it. We worked with an acoustic engineer and a composer. And it was really funny because most sound engineers, they want to design for a perfect space. Like, there's no echo, there's nothing. But I said, no, we don't want that. We want to look for imperfection. So the artist comes in, somehow calibrate that. It's not about making the perfections. So that was something that was interesting in the process. And so we decided to have 5 openings. One's the entrance to get in, and a window to look out, a place where you can put your head inside the building, a light to get in, and a basic an aperture for your hand light. And I'm just going to show you a couple of different schemes. But we actually originally thought we wanted to use steel, metal, and bronze to make a building. And the client said it was too expensive. I said, okay, we're just going to use concrete. But actually, concrete became much more expensive, about 5 times more than the initial previous scheme that we did. Because at some point we tested out, we were trying to see, we made a lot of model with the construction company. Mainly because we want to see where the area chips, that's when we know it's going to happen the same thing with the concrete. Because when we did this casting, we did cast the whole thing in one place. We didn't cast it by wall and put it together because I didn't want to have any seam. I didn't want to have anything leakage. So that means that they have to cast this whole thing just like you cast a model. They just cast the whole thing in one piece. But of course, during the process, there's a lot of mistake, right, in the construction site. So we thought that, oh, there's something wrong. So we made a lot of model on site with paper. Because in the construction site, there's more manager than workers. So we thought we'd just go direct to the worker, not do with the managers. So we just showed this and said, this is what we want. and this is what we do when we want a certain curvatures. They tell us the moment you remove this, how this is going to remove. So we thought, okay, the whole thing is easy. So we built the whole thing out of, you can see this is a frame. Basically, they have to build the whole metal frame and then tilt it, run across. So the whole process, also, we didn't want to have too much detail. So typically, you have a lot of these holes, right, with tie rods. Because I knew that at the moment that you have that, it changes the scale of the wall. So no tie rods. But they said, that's okay, we can attach it. Don't trust anybody, you know? You have to trust what you see, because the moment you patch it, everything's become much more visible. So this is a couple weeks ago, and we thought, you know, this wall is actually 1 meter thick. And when you enter, you don't enter, you have to step into the wall. And this is basically, you could hear the building. When the museum is closed, you still could hear the projects inside. So this is it's attached to the Tsang projects, and this is like, just plotting the whole thing. But if we're admiring right now because I designed one part of the facade so that you could experience 3 hours in the whole entire day, sunset and sunrise. Because this wall has a double curvature that goes inward. And so when I told the fabricator, I said, I didn't have drawings because I knew if I have drawings, nobody reads it. So I said, you know, this is a building like an instrument. Like when you whistle, you have this little sheet that goes in. I said, that's what I want the concrete to look like here. So that's what happens, is this is sort of double curvatures here. So when you look at it, suddenly you realize that this building is somewhat kind of strange because typically the curvature is always advanced, it's always about pushing outwards, showing the force of tension. I did the complete opposite because I feel like it's not about the building process and performance, it's actually sort of result of these. So this is actually, it's not finished, it's very complete. This is what you see, there's no seam. But, this is where you put your head in. You can listen, it actually fits perfectly. And this is the space inside. So before the project ended, I thought I have to curate the project because I need to figure out who's going to work on this project for the next year or 2 years. So everything's sort of cast in. You can see that this space looks much further because you thought it's actually a small museum, but actually I did something with the perspective where actually this part of the wall is pushed inwards, so you actually forces the depth of it much longer. And then I use a handrail as a hiding element because if I have a wall, blank wall, and put it in, I would realize it's actually something I'm playing with the dimension of the wall. I put a handrail so because they don't see it. So they're holding it, they're pretending this is something they have to catch. Right? It's like a magician trick, right? You don't want somebody to notice the imperfection, you put a handrail there. So they just grab it. So that thing is all cast in. So when it rains, it has a hole here, so everything just goes through. Right? Cleans itself on the sun. There's no glass because you don't want any other materials. It's too simple material, just concrete and metal. So the project I call it is curating through architecture. It's like, how do you actually represent architecture? So I thought, problematic is going to have exhibition with photograph models. That's not exhibition, not showing exhibitions in architecture. So we developed 5 projects, at least right now. A group of artists from Cuba. There's an Argentine artist named Thomas Saraceno who does a lot of things with inflatables, who actually built an exhibition with inflatable inside the piece. So the 5 holes, we just have balloons sticking out. A landscape architect from Brussels. I don't know exactly what he's doing right now, but he's actually doing something on looking at land and landscapes. Artist called Manfred Vidinati, he's actually doing a lot of projects with sand, so I think that you can fill up the whole project with sand. So you never understand the plumb lines of the topography. The first project I'm working is actually next week, so after today I'm going to Beijing to work with a composer, he's a professor at UC Berkeley, and he focuses on low frequency projects, sound projects. So we thought something I wanted to sort of invite is actually a group of people that actually sort of look at the work, how to exhibit idea of architecture, not from architecture per se, but how they interact with it. But at the end, my project is never done because this is where my project starts. Because the building is done, and this is all the project starts right now. So I get to follow for 1 year, and I do collaboration, we do documentation. At the end, the whole project is about how do people see the project. This person is actually the director, vice president for JP Morgan, investment company, the most powerful figures. But how it happened, she's inside listening to the project. So I think that if possible, we could do projects that actually get people to inside and outside, but in a way to understand my interest in how to understand how to read buildings, right, in this process. Anyhow, but this is a couple projects. Pam was mentioning about I do come here quite a bit. I'm working on a project right now. I'm doing an exhibition for Garden City, monograph, but also doing a project which I will tell you later. You can just come to the opening in May at Taipei Fine Art Museum, and we're doing a project about cities. So this is something that we're building on, and this is what one particular practice. Somebody who's a foreigner in Hong Kong building projects in Asia. Anyhow, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you, and you're patient. I know you guys have lunchtime already, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure, yes. 有没有什么问题要请教？是有什么感想？我想那个 Thomas 曾教授就是那个英文他就说 a man with many hats. You have a lot of hats here. 就是多才多艺，就是有很多角色的人。他同时是 architect， 同时是 curator， 策展人，同时也可以是一个 educator， 一个 artist. A lot of hats. And all fits in one hat, like that they're doing here. It fits perfectly. 好，那站在那个学校，我们学会今年的这个 Beyond 东海之外这个 lecture series 的立场，那这边我们其实刚好可以看到很多。在建筑之外合作的可能，或是那个相信你的那个，我觉得刚刚有一个重点是那个你刚刚说的 ，you mentioned about this how you sort of visualize a project and then research backward. So you trust your instinct at the first beginning and then you research from your. Do you research from your instinct or how does that work actually? What do you mean? What it really means to research backward?
Yeah. I'm sure you guys get a project to study, like a building, do analysis, right? A lot of times it's figurative, formal analysis. My type of research is also see how whatever I built can go back into the research. So in other words, using your project to reflect about how your project fits into the context of larger hopes of ideas like museums, right? When for example, when I started talking about this small unit, I didn't really thought about China had so many museums. I felt it was just personally just kind of intuitive. I thought, this is the space I get, and this is I could contact. But then I started to find out that the research, then I tried to figure out how this project would fit into a larger context. So that's how it sort of came about. I knew a research from Columbia University is doing about museum booms, and I was invited to a talk. And I started to realize that, wait, this project could fit into the category. It's not about the museum boom. It's about the succinct reduction. And I could use my project as a prototype to reflect a larger discussion to it. So I didn't have to build something, but that was very important. So that's why I said you have to understand your project context, because it's a form of telling stories through it. It's not telling like your typical narrative. You say, "Oh, this is my project." You have a figure. You don't use a character. You use the building as a character to describe it. So that was a very important process. I teach also master thesis, and I tell my thesis students, don't go through a tradition of doing research. Just find a context, pose it, and see and test it. Because the thing is that why? Because we don't get so much time to do research. You only get maybe typical project. You might say that you spend you have, I know your semester here is 18 weeks, right?
Yes.
Our Hong Kong U is 12 weeks. So we spend if we spend 2 months doing research, and then 2 weeks doing projects, you're not going to get a good project. So I thought, why don't they go the other way? Because then you could use your project to research backward. And I thought maybe that's maybe a way of working. It's sometimes a little cheating, because you have to trust your instinct, what works and what's an instinct. But it's possible you can work that way. Because our project, I mean, we have my studio, usually we have smart boys and girls. And they're very usually artistic. Usually people who have our contacts, we have a lot of people in Japan and Korea. But the thing is, we don't have so many people. So we have to figure out how to do very agile, right? We have to, that's why I said that as a person I wear many hats, because our studio, everybody has to wear different hats, right? Because you have to adapt, to different projects. That's the things about it. And also probably come from a point where ideas, I also like to create a school called undisciplinary school. There's no disciplinary. And you just based on thematic interests. So if you have to figure out, if I need to make something, I learn to become a carpenter, a labor philosopher, do something just to get to that. Because then this way you could actually develop a much more interesting, holistic point of view. And I had this idea because China right now, we realize that there's many schools being created. Everybody's specialized. A lot of schools is funded by car companies. And so the idea is that to train people into vocational, they have one particular skill, they go out, and those jobs no longer exist anymore. Right? And I find that slightly a problem. I think the government kind of notices that. So I've been talking to a different kind of team talking about this idea. Is it possible to create this program? But they say, well, no way existed. But you're actually completely wrong, because the thing is, MIT Media Lab is an undisciplinary practice. It's the people who didn't fit into other programs. That's how they created it. And then you have to figure out based on thematic, they have to generate their own funding, so they become little laboratories. And the person who runs the school right now, something I forgot his name, something called Ito. He was a DJ, never went to school. And when MIT hired him, he said, his school was like, this guy doesn't even have a college degree. How can he become a director for MIT's Media Lab? This guy doesn't have a degree. And so he had a very interesting plan. He created a new foundation with Stanford University. The idea is that you have to be under 20 years old, or 21. We'll give you fellowships. You cannot be over 21. You have to be under 21. We'll give you $200,000 to develop ideas. But we'll give you this $200 so you don't go to school. And it's very provocative, huh? I mean, it's very funny for somebody from Hong Kong U. We've done not so well-funded programs, but we're talking about ideas like, how can you become liberated in this process? So you fund this program so that you could actually develop ideas, and they will support your ideas. Because they realize if you're over 21, you're too old. Those ideas are not fresh anymore. And so I thought that was a very cool program. And that's why I'm always trying to develop good, we have always these crazy ideas, trying to develop these type of projects, right? In school, and it is possible to support by government, right? So that's the kind of ideas. And it also means you have to wear different hats, right? Yeah, kids. Any other questions?
可以用中文问，我们可以了解。
Sorry, I might speak too fast. I know you guys only have 1 hour.
好
If you have any question, you can come up and ask me.
如果没有的话，我们因为时间不多就是今天就我觉得是这样子，有什么问题可以来聊那就谢谢他们。